Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I'm Erica, and today we are talking about video, but not in the sense of I'm teaching you how to use video or what videos to use, but in a different way, and I'll get to that in a moment. And so today, it's called Video Kills the Teaching Star. And when I was thinking about presenting, what I was thinking about was how things have changed from just less than a year ago, and how I have changed as an educator from less than a year ago, and how things have just come together. Like everything is just so different now. And so I'm going to be talking about engaging students in every learning environment, whether you are 100% virtual or if you are hybrid, concurrent, blended type of learning environment. We're going to talk about some strategies that can help you get along in all of those environments. And so a little bit about me. Oops. A little bit about me. I grew up in Southern California, and I came from, I was born the year MTV came out, 1981. So MTV will be celebrating their 40th anniversary.
MTV came out. She was born that year.
I'm sorry? So when MTV came out, I was born in 1981, and the first video that was shown on MTV was the video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. So that's kind of what I was thinking about when creating this presentation. So I've been teaching 15 years, history, social science, and I currently teach both 7th and 11th grade. I'm at 2 different school sites, but I am 100% virtual, which makes it a little bit easier, just a little bit. I work for ABC Unified, and I actually work along with Oscar. We're in the same school. So hi, Oscar. And I saw somebody mention Linwood a little bit earlier. That's where I spent my first 3 years teaching, Linwood Unified. I taught at Cesar Chavez Middle School. So if you are from Linwood Unified, hi. You can connect with me at Tech and Style. I'm on Twitter, Instagram. I have a TikTok account. I don't really use it, but it's there. And you can email me at techandstyle@gmail.com. I am a certified Durani. That means that I completely love the band Duran Duran. They are my favorite band. They have been my favorite band since 1984 when my sister played the video to Hungry Like the Wolf on our VHS VCR in my parents' bedroom with their 13-inch TV that had a dial to change the channels, by the way. So I've inserted a little bit about Duran Duran in here as well. So if you've ever come to one of my presentations, you know that like themes. I don't know where that came from because I was never that teacher at first, but now I just kind of love themes. It gives me an idea of like where things are going. So our playlist today, instead of an agenda, our playlist is There's Something I Should Know. Of course, that is a Duran Duran song from 1983. We're going to get into the groove with Madonna. And of course, we're going to talk about girls on film, not so much girls, but being on film. And again, another Duran Duran song, 1981. And one of my favorite Wham songs from 1984, Freedom. Not Freedom 90, which was a George Michael song, but a Wham song. All right, so I want to know a little bit about you, though. If you were made into an action figure, what 2 accessories would you come with? If I get an answer in the chat. So for me, I would actually come with a KitchenAid stand mixer. and a set of Minnie Mouse ears. All right, we have glasses and a phone, a book, and a pair of sunglasses. Change of clothes, battle armor. Coffee and leggings, a hotspot and coffee. Lots of coffee. I should have picked coffee. I didn't have my morning cup this morning. A Keurig, that's very specific. A matching person wallet set, love that. Magic mom bag, hi Sophia. And automatically refilled teacup. Do those exist?
In my dreams, I wish that it did.
AirPods and coffee, loose fitting pants. A Kohl's charge card. Kohl's cash. An iPad, all right. So we can see that these responses are kind of telling, right? I see lots of coffee lovers. I see lots of tech lovers with the phones and the iPads. Lots of accessory lovers, purses and necklaces. Love that. All right. And so this brings me to our first topic. Is there something I should know? And that relates to relationships first, right? And we've probably been hearing this, if not earlier, since March of 2020, when we went virtual for quote unquote 2 years or 2 weeks, right? Hopefully not 2 years. But relationships first. And so that's just one way I engage my students into building relationships with me, dropping things into the chat like that. That was actually my attendance question last week. And so there were, very telling things about my students. One student said, he was very specific. He said that he would come with ice water because he loves ice. I know this. And also he would come with a lion/husky. And so when I asked him, specifically, do you want a lion or a husky, or what is it that you want? And he said, I want a lion and a husky mixed together. And I thought that was really interesting. So we had kind of a conversation around that. And so I want my students to tell me what they like and who they are. It shows us obviously how we care about them. I'm not a quote person. I actually dislike quotes, and I don't have them all over my wall. And I think they're a little bit cheesy, and I know that some people just love them, which is great. But I'm not a quote person. But this one still resonates, even though I'm not a quote person. Children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, which is very true. And so I try and let my students know that I care in the littlest ways. I'm not a touchy-feely person. I'm just not. But when it comes to the students, they're still kids, even though I teach 7th graders and 11th graders who are so super cool. But they like to play things cool, but they need to know that you care. And so we have to build community. When we first went virtual last March, I think what was happening was we were trying to recreate this environment for our students that was quote unquote, just like the classroom, right? We were trying to do things that we did in the classroom all online. But it doesn't always work, and we have to rethink things like the traditional icebreakers. When when school starts, my tradition is that I love to get the kids up and out of their seat doing gallery walks, and we do that for 2 weeks in my classroom at the beginning of the school year, because we're doing gallery walks, we do post-it notes and sticky notes, and they're standing up and talking to each other and getting to know each other. But we couldn't do that virtually. So, things like that. That's where tools come in, like Padlet and Wakelet and Jamboard. But then it's like, what do I do with those things? Well, we use them as conversation starters. So things like the attendance questions, like I posted earlier, the this or that, like what kind of things do they like, Coke or Pepsi? So the this or that that's underlined, that's actually a link to a resource from another teacher who has like this plethora of this or that questions. I tell people all of these things that I'm not touchy-feely, and I don't like quotes. I feel like I'm not super creative when it comes to building relationships. I just don't know where to start, but resources help. So I'm super thankful for the teacher community who shares all of these things with me, because I don't know what questions to ask students, because I feel like sometimes I'm so far removed, right? So resources are out there, plentiful, to get to know your students. Activities build community as well. So things like using Puzzle Party on Google Arts and Culture. It's one of their projects or experiments that they do. It's a collaborative way that people, not just students, but people can put a puzzle together based on some different artwork. And so I do that sometimes as a brain break, but it also gets the kids working together, both verbally and non-verbally, depending on how you want to do it. Pear Deck has some great resources for building community already built for you. And of course, Flipgrid, there's theme days, lunch bunch, breakfast club, co-creating norms and expectations with students for your traditional classroom procedures, like breakout rooms and class discussions. And so theme days, I love theme days. Like, as you can see, I love just themes. I always ask when there was our holiday party online, I asked somebody at the school, is there going to be a theme? And they were like, well, you can dress fancy. So I did. And I was like the only one who dressed fancy because I like theme days. Same thing with the last Q meetup for QLA. I asked Kristen, is there going to be a theme this time? And she said, pink and red. So I said, okay, great. So it gives me some guidance, right? So building community is a huge deal. My virtual week goes like this. So Mondays, I teach my 7th graders, and we have Magical Mouse Ears Monday. And on that day, we do an edgy protocol called Fast and Curious, and wouldn't be a Q session unless we mentioned edgy protocols, right? So I do Fast and Curious with them to start off the week. We do some sort of learning activity related to our curriculum and evidence of learning to close it out. And I replicate that type of schedule with my 11th grade students. And my theme that day is either school spirit, or college wear. Wednesdays are asynchronous day, so I usually have an Ed Puzzle review or preview.
Yep.
On Thursdays, I see my 7th graders again. And since they didn't get to see me on Tuesday, I replicate the spirit wear or college wear theme. And I do a weekly check-in with them, because that's the last day I see them during the week. And then again, learning activity and some sort of evidence to show me what they know. And again, I replicate that schedule with my 11th graders. So my 7th graders got Magical Mouse Ears Monday, but my 11th graders, they get Fun Shirt Friday. And so with these themes, I always mention them to my students so that I'm not just the only one dressing in theme every day, but I mention them to my students too, to participate as part of a way to build community with them. And so you can see that I have a pretty intact or straightforward routine that I do each week. And so that helps me to get into the groove with things. And we've been virtual, like I said, since last March. And so I had to really think about like what is going to be a worthwhile routine for me being 100% virtual, but also what if we were to go into hybrid? What if we were going to do concurrent? And so I really needed to think about what type of schedule would work in all of those environments that would work for me, so that I could be sustainable as a teacher and also would work for my students. All right, so building routines, it's all up to you. That was my routine, but your routine could be different. Your routine's got to work for you and your students. And so some things to consider: routines for building community, routines for your classwork and assignments, both, or I should say for all types of environments. What are you going to do if you have to go back from 100% virtual to hybrid in a couple of weeks, which some of us might be in that position? Things to think about. How are you going to make the work manageable for everybody? Routines for tech support. This was something that I thought of in the fall when I knew that my students were going to have problems with tech, and there weren't going to be these huge problems that needed fixing. They weren't going to be like they need a new hard drive, or their USB drive is broken or something. It wasn't going to be that kind of problem. It was going to be connectivity issues. And so I had to think about like, what could I do to mitigate that? What could I do to make sure that the lesson keeps flowing, but that I'm also addressing that student's needs? So I came up with a routine for tech support. I told my kids, and I posted it in the Google Classroom, if you're having issues with connectivity, these are the 3 things you need to do. First, refresh, then rejoin, and then restart. And I call them the 3 R's of virtual learning: refresh, rejoin, restart. And that cut out so many questions in the fall. And now they have the agency to solve their own problems because they know refresh, rejoin, restart. And that helps me when I'm teaching my class virtually, when I'm in the middle of a lesson, that I don't have to stop and tell them what to do, because in the chat, they'll tell me, be right back, I'm gonna rejoin. Be right back, I gotta restart. And it was just so much weight lifted off my shoulders because I knew those were the issues that they were gonna have. Some issues also include if their borrowed device isn't working. So I tell them,
I just got a pneumonia vaccine, so I cannot.
So tell me when that happens, and I know who to contact. So all of those things need a routine as well, so that things keep going. And of course, a routine for work-life balance. My dog actually helps me with this routine, and it's so weird because after school, which is at 2:30, I'm still working, I'm grading, I'm answering emails, I'm finishing the next day's lesson, whatever it is, right? It's 2:30 and I keep doing this stuff, but at 4:30, he comes upstairs to my office and he tells me it's quitting time. And it's like on the dot sometimes, 4:30, he just comes and knows like, Mom, stop working. It's so weird. And he's a dog. But I tell him just a little bit longer. But then I hear my boyfriend in the next room at 5 o'clock, shutting down his computer, shuffling papers into a stack. And I just get up because it's 5 o'clock and things can wait till tomorrow. So that's kind of how I know my routine. I don't pay attention too much to the clock when I'm teaching. I don't pay too much attention to the clock when I'm working or in the midst of creating this amazing lesson, right? But then I hear things to signal like it's quitting time. And so I need to make sure that I have that work-life balance, especially working at home when everything gets meshed together.
Mm.
So by now you're probably wondering about these themes and what is it like being in Ms. Aguirre's virtual history class? This is what it's like. This is what you'll see. You'll see my favorite things, my clapper to give applause to my students, which I have right here, actually. I don't usually use it too loudly because the dog goes crazy. I do the theme days. The great thing about working at home is that I can do quick changes between class periods. This on the lower right-hand corner, that was my outfit for when we talked about the Roaring 20s with my 11th grade classes. My Christmas tree hat for the holidays. Like I said, I have Magical Mouse Ears Monday. And sometimes if I feel like it, I'll just go ahead and break out into song at the beginning of class when I play music for them at the beginning. They always hear 3 bands. They always hear the Backstreet Boys. They always hear Duran Duran. They always hear NSYNC. Those are the 3 standards I have for them. Are they annoyed? I keep asking them. I keep asking for their feedback. I'm like, hey, do you want me to stop singing? And nobody says anything. And I say, it's okay. Like, I'm not offended because I know that I'm not that great. So you can ask me to stop singing, but nobody ever does. All right, girls on film. When finding this video, when finding Sing for Us, oh no, you don't want to hear that. When finding this video, I was a little bit nervous because the original video for Girls on Film, if you're a hardcore Duran Duran fan, is not appropriate at all. So I was really nervous clicking on the video, trying to find it for you guys because it was just not appropriate. But then when I started kind of fast forwarding through, I realized, oh, that there is a clean version. When Duran Duran pretty much promotes the not clean version a lot, all the time. That was actually what was on the VHS tape that my sister played for us. I was 3, so you know, I don't have a bad sister, but I guess we just don't know better. And so for Girls on Film, you want to work it. Oh, there's John Taylor, my favorite. Right, we want to work it, but we need to be authentic at the same time. And so this reminds, this was brought up in Leticia's keynote this morning. Know your audience, right? What are our students like? That goes into building community. Share your personality. Allow students to get to know you as a person. Obviously, I'm not shy about that. I share, a lot appropriate things with my students. Create a class or school-friendly social media account. I had a question about this once when I mentioned it about what do we do with our district? Do we ask permission? I never did. Because I started that social media account years ago. Now there is some actual guidelines with the district. So if you are interested in doing that, check with your district on guidelines. If you're not going to create a social media account, that's your personality, and that's okay. There are multiple other ways to share. I actually don't advertise my social media account with the students anymore. I find that it's unnecessary with a lot of the things that I do. But students who do follow me on that particular account, it's a conversation starter as well, because they'll see photos that I don't normally share with them during class, like of me on a walk with my dog, or me, when things weren't in a pandemic, when I would go see a movie, I'd take a picture of my movie ticket, or just things on your weekend. And so coming back to that, Coming back from the weekend, the students would ask me questions. We'd have a conversation. Share stories about when you were younger. I mean, it sounds weird and it sounds like, kind of old fogey-ish, like, oh, back in the olden days, you know, you don't want to nag at them, but share stories. I grew up in the district that I teach in. And so my students like hearing those stories about when I was a kid because we're sharing similar experiences. Like I said, talk about your weekend, your family, your dog, and then allow students to share, of course. Sharing photos, have a greeting and a closing. When I started creating the presentation and thought about the video killed the teaching star, I thought about how I was conducting class virtually. And every morning I greet my students, good morning, historians, how are you doing today? And every morning or afternoon when the period ends, I tell them, be excellent to each other, a la Bill and Ted. And I felt like that YouTube influencer, that person on YouTube doing their vlog, because I had a greeting and I had a closing, right? And I thought, man, this is so weird, like having to be kind of a YouTube star when I'm teaching class. But you want to think about who or what are we competing with for our students' attention? Again, this is whether we're 100% virtual or we are in our traditional environment too, because there's just so much media out there. Who or what are we competing for with our students, for our students' attention? So it's really important that we know our audience and we try to get to them. Create dynamic and interactive lessons. So when I tell people I teach history, or I should say when I tell non-teachers and my friends that I teach history, they think about their old history teacher back in high school who would lecture at the podium and they would take notes and then there was a test and then they move forward, right? It's obviously not like that anymore. For whatever subject, whether it's history or math or science or English or an elective, it's not like that anymore, and because we're competing for attention. And that sounds so weird to say out loud. I'm competing for attention. And it sounds like we're these attention hogs, but that's what we want. We want our students' attention so that they learn. When I'm creating my lessons, I always think about, well, what skills do I want my students to have? I want them to be able to read, write, speak, and listen. And so every single week, I make sure I have at least one of those, or I have all of those components embedded every single week. I do this through text, video, audio, collaboration, and I collect student feedback. I ask my students, Okay, more visuals, interactive decks, check-ins, creating videos of your students, flipping teaching, message parents more, keep bringing realia or visuals, more routines with edu protocols, okay, checking in with students, focusing on feedback rather than grading anything. Lots of check-ins. That is one thing that I think I want to continue doing as well. Obviously, the check-in was the thing, right? Like last year, using a check-in for your students when they're virtual because you don't see them. Well, it's not like I checked in with my students in person either. Like I would get to talk to a handful of students in the classroom, but being able to check in, on a form, it seems impersonal, but I'll tell you how to make it a little bit more personal in a moment. All right, another question. What is one new thing you have done this year that has failed? And I put failed in quotation marks because maybe it wasn't a failure, but maybe it was just like, this isn't good. For this one, I think I would say workarounds. Like there's always a workaround for this or a workaround for that. It makes sometimes workarounds make things more complicated. So workarounds are my fail. Ooh, Zoom chat listed your address. I wonder how they got that. Doing it all focus on the important. Determining how much work to assign. It always ends up being too much and the assignments flop. Independent reading project with digital checkpoints. Optional help sessions, Google Maps. Too much in Google Classroom for K. Posting too many individual assignments. I can totally relate to that. Working from home. Collecting assignments all at once for the week. Oh man, I learned that like my first year teaching. I taught block in Linwood Unified, 90 minutes. And we got to keep the kids engaged. So it was like this assignment and that assignment, this thing and that thing. And then 90 minutes for app. And I had a pile of papers with like this high, like a foot high. So we have a lot of things that we think we, again, quote unquote, fail at. Maybe just things that just didn't go as planned. Right? But we've learned, all of us, to be flexible. And for me, that's really freeing. Like I said before, I am a totally different teacher than I was last March. And it's so much more freeing because I'm taking this time to really think about how I'm teaching. And not just how I'm teaching, but what I'm teaching. I'm taking this time to experiment. And it's been kind of a long time coming where, I was very standards driven. And, of course, standards are important, right? But that being said, sometimes just going standard by standard by standard, or for me, teaching chronologically, because I teach history, going by the pacing guide, making sure I hit all those bullet points. It's been super freeing for me to just say, you know what, this stuff is important, but let's see what happens when I do this, or let's see what happens when I try something new. A couple years ago, or last year was the first time I ever did a novel study in my history class. And I'm not an English teacher, so doing a novel study was like, like freaking me out because I'd never done it. But the kids really liked it. And so that pushed me to do more new things. Right, so be flexible. One of the things that was freeing was that I offer my students more opportunities for ownership and choice. It's still really hard for me because I'm kind of, I'm still partially that teacher who likes to control the environment and, make sure everything goes according as planned. But, there are those pockets where it's like, it's okay for my students to choose, find the opportunities through different assignments. Sometimes people love those choice boards. Me, that's too much choice. I think, for somebody who's, a little controlling like me, like, I think that's too much choice, but I'm okay with having them choose between 3 things. My student teacher gave a choice to the class to research a person in Black history, but he gave a list of like 124 students, or 124 people, which is great. Like, that was the list, but for me, that was like, that was just overwhelming. So sometimes there can be too much choice. One of the things that I love doing now that I never thought to do was asking students how they prefer to work. And this virtual environment that I'm in is actually a great thing for that, because I can ask them, do you want to be teacher guided? Do you want to have do you want to work independently, or do you want to work in a small group? And with the virtual environment, it's kind of like, you just push a couple buttons and you stick them in breakout rooms. There's your small group. And then teacher guided, you can stay in the main room. And then sometimes if I get lazy, I'll say, okay, independent, I'm going to be teacher guiding these people, but you're going to stay in this room. If I'm not lazy, I'll put them all in a different room. And so I use Pear Deck to have them drag the icon and to show me, so I can see visually who wants to go to a breakout room, who wants to stay with me in the main room. And so giving students that choice is really empowering for them. And it's really nice for me because it frees me up. And usually, they want to do the independent work, and there's some people who just want to do group work. Very rarely I actually get people who want to say they want to do teacher guided, and which is kind of cool because that means I get to bounce to the different small groups and see how they're doing and discuss the content with them. Creating structures that allow students to engage non-verbally. So, I mentioned creating dynamic lessons, and I mentioned how weekly I want my students to read, write, speak, and listen. Speaking is a huge thing because how long, they might go a whole day without actually talking to anybody in this virtual environment. And if you're concurrent, that might be the same thing too. So when they don't speak, it's not good, but sometimes it's okay to be able to engage non-verbally. So allowing hand gestures or signals, utilizing the chat. Students are utilizing the chat a lot more. They're getting used to that, which is great. And they're utilizing it in the proper way too. So, I found in the very beginning, it was a lot of, chat talk. Like if you were ever on AIM or ICQ, it was kind of like that. And then, you tell them, well, hey, this is for questions or talking about the content and stuff like that. When you give them a purpose, they'll use it for that purpose. But using features that are available, like here in Zoom, we have raise hand and emoji reactions, also coming soon to Google Meet. And it's important when you're being flexible, really think about how you're teaching, reflect, assess, and reassess your values. All right, because there a few weeks ago, there were still things like some teachers were talking about, like, do you have your cameras on? Do you have them off? What do you require? Or monitoring student engagement and behaviors using a security website like GoGuardian. Teachers were talking about how GoGuardian wasn't working and they couldn't see what their students were doing. And for me, I was like, man, that's a lot of stress. Like, these are not hills I want to die on. I want to talk about, my students learning. I want to talk about my students discussing. Like, I don't want to talk about, like, should I require cameras on or should I allow them to turn it off? Those aren't what I value. Monitoring isn't what I value. Student learning is. So, reassess, think about those things. Fail forward, take risks. Again, this is a great time to experiment. And I've never experimented in the same way that I've done now. Take the time to reinvent yourself as a teacher. Okay, so in thinking about this presentation, I thought about, man, some teachers are still thinking about, like, when we go back to normal, quote unquote, I'm gonna go back to doing this. I'm gonna go back to doing that. Some teachers aren't taking this time to really reassess themselves as a teacher. So I thought, man, if you're not reimagining what you teach and how you teach it, you're doing it wrong, bro. You're doing it wrong. You're wasting this time away. Right. And so that's what I have for you. Hopefully you got some good stuff out of this presentation. That's my dog, Dr. Indiana Jones. I call him Indy. He says thank you too. And thank you for letting me go, because I'm sure he misses me. But I also have some resources for you. The bit.ly for this presentation is at the bottom left corner. I talked about my weekly check-in form. Forgot to mention about my weekly check-in form. I change it weekly and based on the needs of my students. So you'll see that weekly check-in form, and there's a video embedded. They're usually like little self-help, mental health videos, and I change the video weekly based on what my students say or how they're doing. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to unmute. Let me hear your voices. Hi, Darlene.
Your check-in is only for people in your domain.
Oh, I will change that right now.
Well,